Question 1. Consider a scenario where a corporate security team is investigating potential intellectual property theft. The primary suspect is an employee who has recently resigned. The investigation requires the forensic examination of the employee's company-issued laptop. The legal department has indicated that the findings may be used in civil litigation. The forensic investigator needs to acquire the data from the laptop's hard drive. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of digital forensics and the requirements for evidence intended for legal proceedings in the United States? Option A. Copy only the files and folders that appear to be relevant to the suspected theft from the employee's user profile. Option B. Connect the laptop to a network and use remote access tools to copy the suspected files directly from the live operating system. Option C. Use a standard file copy utility to transfer all visible files from the hard drive to an external storage device. Option D. Perform a bit-by-bit forensic image of the entire hard drive, ensuring all sectors are copied, and then conduct the analysis on the image. Correct answer is D. Perform a bit-by-bit forensic image of the entire hard drive, ensuring all sectors are copied, and then conduct the analysis on the image. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to preserve the integrity of digital evidence while meeting the demands of a legal investigation. The investigator must balance the thoroughness required for potential litigation with the practicalities of data acquisition and storage. The choice of imaging method directly impacts the admissibility and defensibility of the evidence. The correct approach, bit-by-bit imaging, represents best professional practice because it creates an exact, sector-by-sector replica of the original storage media. This method ensures that no data is altered, omitted, or added, thereby maintaining the chain of custody and the integrity of the evidence. This aligns with fundamental forensic principles and is often a requirement under U.S. legal frameworks, such as those governing federal investigations, to ensure that the evidence presented in court is an uncompromised representation of the original state. This meticulous approach is crucial for satisfying the Daubert standard or Frye standard, which govern the admissibility of scientific evidence in U.S. courts, by demonstrating that the methodology used is reliable and scientifically sound. An incorrect approach, such as performing logical imaging without proper justification or documentation, poses significant regulatory and ethical failures. Logical imaging, which captures only files and folders, can inadvertently exclude deleted files, slack space, or unallocated clusters that might contain crucial evidence. This omission could be seen as a failure to conduct a comprehensive investigation, potentially violating due process rights if exculpatory evidence is missed. Furthermore, if the investigator does not document the rationale for choosing logical imaging over bit-by-bit imaging, it raises questions about their competence and adherence to established forensic protocols, potentially leading to the exclusion of evidence in court. Another incorrect approach, such as modifying the source drive before imaging, is a severe ethical and regulatory violation. Any alteration to the original evidence compromises its integrity and chain of custody, rendering it inadmissible. This directly contravenes the core principles of digital forensics and would likely lead to the dismissal of charges or a mistrial in a U.S. court. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes the preservation of evidence integrity. This involves understanding the legal requirements of the jurisdiction, the nature of the investigation, and the potential evidentiary value of all data, including deleted or hidden information. When in doubt, or when the investigation could lead to criminal prosecution, bit-by-bit imaging is the default and most defensible method. If logical imaging is considered, it must be thoroughly justified, documented, and approved by relevant stakeholders, with a clear understanding of its limitations and potential evidentiary gaps. The investigator must always be prepared to defend their chosen methodology based on established forensic principles and legal precedent. Question 2. The investigation demonstrates that a critical piece of digital evidence, a hard drive containing financial transaction logs, was seized from a suspect's office. The forensic investigator, after creating a forensic image of the drive, needs to transport the original drive to a secure laboratory for further analysis. The investigator places the original drive in a tamper-evident bag and signs the bag. Upon arrival at the lab, a different technician signs for the bag and takes it to the evidence locker. Later, the original investigator requests the drive back for a secondary examination and is given the drive by the evidence custodian. However, the investigator realizes that the transfer of the drive from the initial seizure to the lab, and then back to the investigator, was not fully documented on a formal chain of custody log, with specific times and the signatures of all individuals involved, in each transfer point being omitted for the return to the investigator. What is the most significant professional and legal implication of this incomplete documentation? Option A. The suspect may claim the evidence was planted, leading to a mistrial. Option B. The forensic investigator may face disciplinary action for minor administrative oversight. Option C. The forensic image of the hard drive will be considered invalid, regardless of the original imaging process. Option D. The evidence may be challenged as inadmissible in court due to a broken or incomplete chain of custody. The correct answer is D. The evidence may be challenged as inadmissible in court due to a broken or incomplete chain of custody. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates the critical importance of maintaining an unbroken chain of custody for digital evidence. In a forensic investigation, especially one that may lead to legal proceedings, any break in the chain of custody can render the evidence inadmissible. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires meticulous attention to detail and adherence to strict protocols under pressure, where a single oversight can jeopardize the entire investigation. The integrity of the evidence is paramount, and its admissibility in court hinges on proving that it has not been tampered with, altered, or substituted since its collection. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the integrity and admissibility of the digital evidence. By meticulously documenting every transfer, access, and handling of the evidence, investigators ensure that a clear and verifiable record exists. This documentation, often in the form of a chain of custody form, serves as proof that the evidence has been handled properly and is in the same state as when it was originally seized. This aligns with fundamental legal principles and forensic best practices, ensuring that the evidence can withstand scrutiny in a court of law. An incorrect approach that fails to document a transfer of evidence to a secondary storage location is professionally unacceptable. This creates a gap in the chain of custody, raising serious doubts about the evidence's integrity. It violates the core principles of digital forensics and can lead to the evidence being excluded from proceedings, effectively undermining the investigation. This failure constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical breach, as it compromises the reliability and trustworthiness of the forensic process. Another incorrect approach, such as allowing an unauthorized individual to access the evidence without proper documentation, is also professionally unacceptable. This introduces a high risk of tampering or contamination, even if no actual alteration occurs. It violates the principle of limited access and accountability, which are cornerstones of secure evidence handling. Such an action would be a direct contravention of forensic best practices and potentially specific legal requirements for evidence handling, leading to its inadmissibility. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a proactive understanding of chain of custody requirements before any evidence is collected. Investigators must be trained in and consistently apply standardized procedures for evidence handling, documentation, and storage. When faced with a situation requiring evidence transfer or access, the immediate step should be to consult and adhere to established protocols, ensuring all necessary documentation is completed contemporaneously. If any doubt exists about the correct procedure, seeking guidance from a supervisor or legal counsel is essential. The guiding principle should always be the preservation of evidence integrity and its admissibility. Question 3. Upon reviewing a scene where a suspected insider threat is actively engaged in data exfiltration from a corporate network, a forensic investigator observes that the suspect's workstation is currently logged in and actively transferring files to an external storage device. The investigator has reason to believe that if the workstation is not immediately secured, the suspect may delete or further disseminate the sensitive data, rendering it irrecoverable. The investigator has not yet obtained a search warrant for the premises or the workstation. Which of the following actions best aligns with the legal and ethical requirements for digital forensic investigations in the United States? Option A. Power down the workstation remotely to prevent further data transfer, then proceed to obtain a search warrant. Option B. Immediately seize the workstation and external storage device to preserve the data, documenting the observed activity and the belief that evidence would be destroyed if action was delayed. Option C. Contact the suspect directly to inquire about the data transfer and request voluntary cooperation in securing the evidence. Option D. Wait to obtain a search warrant, as the presence of an active transfer does not definitively prove imminent destruction of evidence. The correct answer is B. Immediately seize the workstation and external storage device to preserve the data, documenting the observed activity and the belief that evidence would be destroyed if action was delayed. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, balancing the urgent need for evidence with the strict legal requirements for its acquisition. The professional challenge lies in recognizing the potential for exigent circumstances to justify bypassing traditional warrant procedures, while simultaneously understanding the narrow scope and high burden of proof for such exceptions. Misinterpreting these exceptions can lead to the suppression of crucial evidence, rendering the forensic investigation ineffective and potentially jeopardizing legal proceedings. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. When faced with a situation that might qualify as an exigent circumstance, a forensic investigator must meticulously assess whether the specific facts meet the established legal criteria for such an exception. This involves demonstrating an immediate threat to life, imminent destruction of evidence, or the risk of a suspect fleeing. The investigator must then document their reasoning thoroughly, and if possible, seek judicial approval even under exigent circumstances. This meticulous adherence to legal standards ensures the integrity of the investigation and the admissibility of evidence. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any potential for evidence destruction automatically constitutes an exigent circumstance. This fails to recognize that the exception is narrowly construed and requires a demonstrable, immediate, and unavoidable threat. For example, simply observing that a computer is powered on does not, in itself, create an exigent circumstance for immediate seizure without a warrant. The law requires more than mere possibility. It demands a strong probability of imminent loss. Another incorrect approach would be to seize evidence without a warrant and then attempt to retroactively justify the seizure based on a weak or speculative claim of exigent circumstances. This is ethically and legally unsound, as it prioritizes expediency over due process and can be seen as a deliberate circumvention of legal safeguards. Such actions violate the principles of lawful evidence collection and can lead to severe professional repercussions, including disciplinary action and the invalidation of the investigation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves a thorough understanding of the relevant legal precedents and constitutional protections. When confronted with a situation that might warrant an exception to the warrant requirement, the investigator should 1. Identify the specific facts that suggest an exigent circumstance. 2. Evaluate these facts against the established legal criteria for the exception. 3. Consult with legal counsel or supervisory personnel to confirm the validity of the exigent circumstance claim. 4. If an exigent circumstance is confirmed, meticulously document the justification for bypassing the warrant. 5. Prioritize obtaining a warrant whenever feasible, even if an exigent circumstance is suspected, to ensure the strongest legal standing for the evidence. Question 4. The evaluation methodology shows that a forensic investigator is tasked with examining a suspect's workstation for evidence of financial fraud. The investigator must determine the most appropriate initial approach to preserve the integrity of potential digital evidence related to file system activity and registry modifications. Which of the following approaches best adheres to forensic best practices and regulatory requirements for digital evidence handling in the United States? Option A. Directly access the suspect's hard drive from a separate forensic workstation and perform a quick scan for recently modified files, copying only those identified files to a USB drive for analysis. Option B. Boot the suspect's workstation using a live operating system and browse the file system and registry using standard operating system utilities to identify relevant files and entries. Option C. Connect the suspect's hard drive to a forensic workstation and use standard Windows registry editing tools to examine the registry hives for suspicious entries without creating a full disk image first. Option D. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the suspect's hard drive using a hardware write blocker, and then conduct all subsequent analysis on this image using read-only forensic tools. The correct answer is D. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the suspect's hard drive using a hardware write blocker, and then conduct all subsequent analysis on this image using read-only forensic tools. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics: the potential for data alteration during the acquisition and analysis phases. Forensic investigators must adhere to strict protocol to ensure the integrity of digital evidence. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough analysis with the imperative to preserve the original state of the evidence, as any alteration could render it inadmissible in legal proceedings. The specific context of analyzing a suspect's workstation for evidence of financial fraud requires meticulous attention to file system artifacts and registry entries, as these often contain crucial timestamps, user activity logs, and configuration details. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes the use of forensically sound imaging techniques and read-only tools. Creating a bit-for-bit forensic image of the suspect's hard drive ensures that the original data remains untouched. Subsequent analysis is then performed on this image, not the original drive. Utilizing specialized forensic software that operates in a read-only mode further guarantees that no modifications are made to the evidence. This methodology aligns with best practices in digital forensics, such as those outlined by NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, guidelines, which are foundational for U.S.-based digital forensic investigations. Adherence to these principles is critical for maintaining the chain of custody and ensuring the admissibility of evidence in court, as mandated by legal frameworks governing digital evidence. Incorrect approach is analysis. Directly booting the suspect's workstation and browsing files using standard operating system tools is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action inherently alters the file system by creating access timestamps, modifying directory entries, and potentially triggering background processes that write data to the disk. This violates the principle of preserving evidence integrity and breaks the chain of custody, making the evidence unreliable and inadmissible. Analyzing the registry using standard Windows tools without first creating a forensic image is also problematic. While registry analysis is crucial, performing it directly on a live system can lead to dynamic changes in registry values as the operating system operates. Furthermore, improper handling of registry hives can lead to corruption or unintended modifications. This approach fails to meet the standards of forensic soundness required for evidence collection. Performing a quick scan for recently modified files and then copying those files to a separate drive without creating a full forensic image is another failure. This selective copying process can miss critical contextual information, such as deleted files, slack space, or unallocated clusters, which might contain vital evidence. It also bypasses the rigorous process of creating a verifiable forensic image, compromising the integrity and completeness of the collected evidence. Professional reasoning. Forensic investigators must adopt a systematic and defensible approach. The decision-making process should prioritize evidence integrity and adherence to established forensic standards. This involves 1. Planning the investigation, including identifying the scope and objectives. 2. Acquiring evidence using forensically sound methods, such as creating bit-for-bit images with write blockers. 3. Documenting every step of the process meticulously, including tools used, timestamps, and any observations. 4. Analyzing the evidence using validated forensic tools in a read-only environment. 5. Reporting findings accurately and objectively, maintaining the chain of custody throughout. This structured approach ensures that the collected evidence is reliable, admissible, and withstands scrutiny in legal proceedings. Question 5. Examination of the data shows that a critical piece of digital evidence, residing on servers located in a country that is a signatory to the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, is required for an ongoing investigation. The investigator needs to obtain this data legally and ensure its admissibility in a U.S. court. Which of the following approaches best aligns with international legal frameworks and forensic best practices for obtaining such evidence? Option A. Initiate a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty (MLAT) request through the appropriate U.S. government channels to the foreign country, formally requesting the seizure and transfer of the digital evidence in accordance with the treaty provisions and the laws of both nations. Option B. Access the data remotely using publicly available tools and techniques, assuming that once the data is accessed, its origin becomes irrelevant for admissibility. Option C. Employ a private digital forensics firm with contacts in the foreign country to bypass official channels and obtain the data through informal means. Option D. Directly contact the foreign data hosting company and request voluntary cooperation in providing the data, relying on their internal policies and the investigator's assurances of confidentiality. The correct answer is A. Initiate a mutual legal assistance treaty, MLAT, request through the appropriate U.S. government channels to the foreign country, formally requesting the seizure and transfer of the digital evidence in accordance with the treaty provisions and the laws of both nations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent complexities of international digital evidence acquisition and the need to balance investigative goals with adherence to diverse legal frameworks. The investigator must navigate the differing legal standards and procedural requirements of multiple sovereign nations, each with its own laws governing data privacy, seizure, and cross-border cooperation. The core difficulty lies in obtaining legally admissible evidence from a foreign jurisdiction without violating its laws or jeopardizing the integrity of the investigation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes lawful and ethical evidence gathering through established international legal mechanisms. Specifically, it leverages mutual legal assistance treaties, MLAT, or similar international agreements. These treaties provide a formal, legally sanctioned framework for requesting and obtaining evidence from foreign governments. Adhering to MLAT ensures that the evidence is collected in a manner that respects the sovereignty of the foreign nation, complies with its domestic laws, and is therefore more likely to be admissible in court. This approach demonstrates a commitment to due process and international legal comity, which are fundamental ethical and professional obligations for a forensic investigator. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing or compelling the production of data from a foreign entity without engaging formal international legal channels is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical breach. It violates the sovereignty of the foreign nation, potentially contravening its data protection laws, e.g., GDPR in Europe, or similar national legislation. Such actions could lead to the evidence being deemed inadmissible in any legal proceeding, thereby undermining the entire investigation. Furthermore, it exposes the investigator and their organization to legal repercussions in both the requesting and the foreign jurisdiction. Another incorrect approach, such as relying on informal requests or private agreements with foreign entities, lacks the legal standing and procedural safeguards necessary for admissible evidence. This bypasses the established legal framework, risking the integrity and admissibility of the evidence and demonstrating a disregard for due process and international legal norms. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the relevant international laws and treaties applicable to the jurisdictions involved. Investigators must first identify the location of the data and the relevant legal frameworks governing that jurisdiction. They should then consult with legal counsel specializing in international law and digital forensics to determine the most appropriate and lawful method for evidence acquisition. This typically involves initiating formal requests through established channels like MLAT, ensuring all documentation and procedures are meticulously followed. Prioritizing lawful acquisition over expediency is paramount to maintaining the integrity of the investigation and ensuring the admissibility of evidence. Question 6. Performance analysis shows that a critical business decision regarding a potential security breach needs to be made within 24 hours, and stakeholders are requesting immediate insights from a compromised server. The forensic investigator has direct access to the live server, which approach best balances the need for timely information with the requirements of a forensically sound investigation. Option A. Prioritize the preservation of the live system by creating a forensic image, then proceed with the collection of volatile data, and subsequently analyze the collected evidence to provide accurate findings. Option B. Inform stakeholders that a full forensic investigation, including preservation and collection, must be completed before any reliable insights can be provided, and offer to provide a preliminary, non-forensic overview based on limited, volatile data if they accept the risks. Option C. Focus on presenting initial findings based on the investigator's experience with similar breaches, without performing a full forensic examination of the compromised server. Option D. Immediately begin analyzing the live system to identify the nature of the breach and extract relevant data for the stakeholders. Correct answer is D. Immediately begin analyzing the live system to identify the nature of the breach and extract relevant data for the stakeholders. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the urgency to provide evidence for immediate business decisions conflicts with the meticulous, legally sound procedures required for a forensic investigation. The pressure to deliver findings quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the evidence and the validity of the investigation. Balancing the need for timely information with the absolute requirement for adherence to forensic principles and legal standards is the core professional challenge. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the preservation and collection phases of the forensic investigation. This aligns directly with the foundational principles of digital forensics, which are heavily influenced by legal admissibility standards. In the U.S., for example, the Daubert Standard and Frye Standard dictate that expert testimony and evidence must be reliable and scientifically valid. This necessitates following established protocols for evidence handling to prevent alteration or contamination. The CHFI framework emphasizes these phases as critical for ensuring that evidence is admissible in legal proceedings and can withstand scrutiny. Proper preservation ensures the original data remains untouched, and meticulous collection ensures a forensically sound copy is made, thereby maintaining the chain of custody and data integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately analyzing the live system for the requested information. This violates the preservation phase. Analyzing a live system can alter volatile data, e.g., RAM contents, network connection, running processes, which is crucial for a complete forensic picture and can be considered spoliation of evidence if not handled properly. This failure to preserve the original state of the system is a significant ethical and regulatory breach, potentially rendering any subsequent findings inadmissible. Another incorrect approach is to bypass formal collection procedures and directly extract data from the live system based on the user's description. This neglects both the preservation and collection phases. It risks incomplete or corrupted data, and more importantly, it breaks the chain of custody. Without a documented, forensically sound collection process, the integrity of the data cannot be verified, making it impossible to prove that the data presented is the same as what was originally on the system. This directly contravenes legal requirements for evidence handling and the ethical obligations of a forensic investigator. A third incorrect approach is to present preliminary findings based on a quick, unverified examination of the live system. This fails to complete the collection and analysis phases properly. Forensic analysis requires a systematic and thorough examination of collected evidence, not a superficial look at a live system. Presenting unverified or incomplete data can mislead stakeholders and potentially lead to incorrect business decisions, while also undermining the credibility of the forensic investigation and the investigator. This is an ethical failure to provide accurate and reliable information. Professional reasoning. Professionals in digital forensics must adopt a systematic, phase-based approach. When faced with stakeholder pressure for immediate results, the decision-making process should involve 1. Clearly communicating the forensic process and its importance to stakeholders, explaining that shortcuts compromise evidence integrity and legal admissibility. 2. Prioritizing the preservation of the original evidence. 3. Executing a forensically sound collection process to create an exact replica of the evidence. 4. Conducting a thorough and documented analysis of the collected evidence. 5. Presenting findings based on the complete analysis, clearly distinguishing between preliminary observations and confirmed findings. This structured approach ensures that the investigation is conducted ethically, legally, and produces reliable, admissible evidence. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that digital forensic reports are often challenged in legal proceedings due to insufficient detail or perceived bias. As a CHFI investigator tasked with documenting a complex data breach investigation, which approach to reporting best upholds the integrity of the investigation and ensures admissibility of findings within a U.S. regulatory framework. Option A. Focus on presenting a narrative that strongly implicates the suspected perpetrator, highlighting evidence that supports this conclusion while downplaying any contradictory information. Option B. Document every action taken, including timestamps, tools, configurations, and any challenges faced, ensuring the report is objective, factual, and free from speculation, allowing for independent verification of the methodology and findings. Option C. Summarize the investigation's outcome based on the most probable scenario, omitting specific technical details that might confuse non-technical stakeholders. Option D. Provide a concise executive summary of key findings, supported by a high-level overview of the tools used, without detailing every investigative step or potential limitations encountered. The correct answer is D. Provide a concise executive summary of key findings, supported by a high-level overview of the tools used, without detailing every investigative step or potential limitations encountered. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, balancing the need for thoroughness and accuracy in documentation with the practical constraints of time and resources. The investigator must ensure that their reporting meets the stringent requirements of legal proceedings and regulatory compliance, without introducing bias or compromising the integrity of the evidence. The pressure to deliver findings quickly can lead to shortcuts that undermine the credibility of the investigation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes meticulous, objective, and verifiable documentation throughout the forensic process. This aligns with best practices in digital forensics and is implicitly supported by the principles of evidence handling and admissibility, which are paramount in legal and regulatory contexts. Detailed notes on every step, including tools used, configurations, timestamps, and any deviations from standard procedures, ensure that the investigation can be replicated and that the findings are defensible. This level of detail is crucial for satisfying the burden of proof in legal proceedings and for demonstrating compliance with any relevant data handling regulations. The focus on objective reporting, free from speculation or personal opinion, is essential for maintaining the integrity of the forensic analysis and ensuring that conclusions are solely based on the evidence. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves summarizing findings without detailing the methodology. This failure violates the principle of transparency and verifiability, making it impossible for others to assess the validity of the conclusions. In a legal context, this lack of detail can lead to evidence being deemed inadmissible, as the chain of custody and the forensic process itself cannot be adequately demonstrated. It also fails to meet the implicit requirements of regulatory frameworks that demand clear audit trails for data handling and analysis. Another incorrect approach is to include personal opinions or assumptions in the report. This introduces bias and undermines the objectivity required in forensic investigations. Regulatory bodies and legal standards demand that forensic reports present factual findings, not subjective interpretation. Such bias can lead to miscarriages of justice and expose the investigator and their organization to significant legal and ethical repercussions. A third incorrect approach is to omit any mention of limitations or challenges encountered during the investigation. All investigations face potential obstacles, such as encrypted files, damaged media, or time constraints. Failing to document these limitations means the report presents an incomplete picture and may mislead stakeholders about the scope and certainty of the findings. Best practices and ethical guidelines require full disclosure of any factors that might affect the interpretation of the evidence. Professional reasoning. Forensic investigators must adopt a systematic and rigorous approach to documentation and reporting. This involves understanding the legal and regulatory landscape governing their work, adhering to established forensic methodologies, and maintaining a commitment to objectivity and accuracy. When faced with time pressures, the decision-making process should prioritize the integrity of the investigation and the defensibility of the findings over speed. This means allocating sufficient time for thorough documentation and reporting, and if necessary, communicating any potential delays or resource limitations to stakeholders. The investigator should always ask, can this process be independently verified? And is this report free from bias and speculation? Question 8. Analysis of a digital forensic investigation reveals that an employee, prior to their resignation, accessed and copied proprietary source code for a company's flagship software product onto an external storage device. The employee then deleted their local copies of the code. There is no immediate evidence of the code being sold or used for financial gain, but the company believes the employee intends to use it to develop a competing product. Based on the CHFI exam's assumed regulatory framework, U.S. federal laws, which cybercrime category most accurately describes this scenario. Option A, intellectual property theft. Option B, financial crime. Option C, cyberstalking. Option D, unauthorized access. Correct answer is A, intellectual property theft. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the sensitive nature of the data involved and the potential for significant legal and reputational repercussions. A forensic investigator must navigate the complexities of identifying and categorizing cybercrimes while adhering strictly to the established legal and regulatory frameworks governing digital evidence. The primary challenge lies in accurately classifying the observed activities to ensure appropriate legal action and evidence handling. The correct approach involves a meticulous examination of the digital artifacts to determine the intent and impact of the actions. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that the investigation is grounded in factual evidence and the relevant legal definitions of cybercrime categories, specifically by focusing on the unauthorized access and exfiltration of proprietary algorithms. The investigator is correctly identifying intellectual property theft. This is crucial because intellectual property laws provide specific protections and remedies for such violations, guiding the subsequent legal and investigative steps. Adhering to these laws ensures that the evidence collected is admissible and that the investigation proceeds within the bounds of legal authority. An incorrect approach would be to broadly categorize the incident as mere unauthorized access without further specificity. While technically true, this fails to capture the full scope and intent of the crime, potentially leading to an inadequate legal response and overlooking the specific protections afforded to intellectual property. This represents a regulatory failure because it does not leverage the specific statutes designed to address the theft of trade secrets or proprietary information. Another incorrect approach would be to assume financial motivation without concrete evidence of financial gain or intent. This could lead to misdirection of the investigation, focusing on financial transaction analysis when the primary crime is the appropriation of valuable intellectual assets. This is an ethical failure, as it can lead to the wrongful accusation of financial crimes and the misallocation of investigative resources. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the available digital evidence. This evidence should then be cross-referenced with established definitions of cybercrime categories as defined by relevant statutes and guidelines. The investigator must ask, what was the primary objective of the perpetrator? What type of data was targeted? What was the ultimate impact or intended impact of the actions? By systematically answering these questions, the investigator can accurately classify the cybercrime, ensuring that the investigation is legally sound, ethically responsible, and professionally executed. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates that a digital forensic investigator is tasked with examining a suspect's electronic devices for evidence of financial fraud. The suspect resides in State A, but the alleged fraudulent transactions occurred through online platforms accessible in State B, and some of the data resides on cloud servers located in State C. The investigator is unsure which state's laws regarding data seizure and privacy are most applicable. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with state laws and the integrity of the investigation? Option A. Proceed with data collection using a standardized, generic forensic methodology without specific regard to any particular state's laws, assuming that technical best practices are sufficient. Option B. Assume that federal laws governing financial fraud supersede all state laws and proceed with data collection based solely on federal guidelines. Option C. Prioritize the laws of State B, as the fraudulent transactions occurred there, and collect data accordingly, disregarding potential implications of laws in State A and State C. Option D. Consult with legal counsel specializing in digital forensics and the laws of State A, State B, and State C to determine the most applicable jurisdiction and legal requirements for data seizure and analysis, and proceed according to their guidance. The correct answer is D. Consult with legal counsel specializing in digital forensics and the laws of State A, State B, and State C to determine the most applicable jurisdiction and legal requirements for data seizure and analysis, and proceed according to their guidance. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, navigating the complex and often overlapping landscape of state laws regarding data privacy and evidence handling. A forensic investigator must not only possess technical expertise, but also a thorough understanding of the legal framework governing their actions to ensure the admissibility of evidence and avoid legal repercussions. The challenge lies in identifying the most relevant and controlling state law, when digital evidence may span multiple jurisdictions, or when the nature of the data implicates different statutory protections. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the most specific and applicable state law governing the type of data and the alleged offense. This demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to legal compliance, which is paramount in forensic investigations. By consulting with legal counsel specializing in digital evidence and the relevant state's laws, the investigator ensures that their actions align with legal requirements, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the investigation and the admissibility of any findings. This proactive legal consultation is a cornerstone of ethical and legally sound forensic practice. An incorrect approach that involves ignoring the specific state laws and proceeding with a generic data collection methodology is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of legal and ethical obligations. It risks rendering collected evidence inadmissible in court due to procedural irregularities or violations of privacy rights established by state statutes. Such an approach demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for the legal framework, potentially leading to severe consequences for the investigation and the investigator. Another incorrect approach, such as assuming federal law preempts all state laws in this context, is also a significant regulatory and ethical failure. While federal laws exist, they often complement rather than supersede state-specific regulations concerning data privacy and evidence collection, particularly in areas like consumer data or specific types of digital communications. Failing to acknowledge and comply with applicable state laws can lead to legal challenges and the exclusion of critical evidence. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a multi-step approach. First, identify the nature of the data being investigated and the alleged offense. Second, determine the primary state jurisdiction where the investigation is taking place and where the data is located or originated. Third, research and understand the specific state laws and regulations pertaining to digital evidence collection, privacy, and reporting for that jurisdiction and data type. Fourth, if there is any ambiguity or potential for overlap with other jurisdictions or laws, consult with legal counsel experienced in digital forensics and the relevant state laws. Finally, document all steps taken, including legal consultations and the rationale for adhering to specific legal requirements, to ensure transparency and defensibility of the forensic process. Question 10. The control framework reveals that in the initial stages of a computer forensics investigation, an investigator must prioritize the preservation of digital evidence, considering the potential for evidence alteration and the requirements for admissibility in legal proceedings. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the fundamental principles of computer forensics and regulatory expectations for evidence handling? Option A. Directly analyzing the live operating system and its files to quickly identify relevant information. Option B. Copying only the files and directories that appear to be directly relevant to the suspected incident. Option C. Relying on system logs and application event data without examining the underlying file system. Option D. Creating a bit-for-bit forensic image of the original storage media before any analysis is performed. The correct answer is A. Directly analyzing the live operating system and its files to quickly identify relevant information. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, balancing the need for rapid evidence acquisition with the imperative to maintain the integrity and admissibility of that evidence. The professional challenge lies in understanding the foundational principles of computer forensics and how they align with legal and ethical standards to ensure that any investigative actions taken are both effective and defensible in a legal context. Careful judgment is required to select the most appropriate method for initial evidence preservation, considering the potential impact on the evidence itself and the subsequent analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation of the original evidence in a forensically sound manner. This aligns with the core tenets of computer forensics, which demand that evidence be collected and handled in a way that prevents alteration or contamination. By creating a bit-for-bit copy, an image of the original storage media, The investigator ensures that the original evidence remains untouched, thereby safeguarding its integrity. This method is crucial for admissibility in legal proceedings, as it allows for independent verification of the findings by other experts. Regulatory frameworks, such as those implicitly guiding CHFI certification, emphasize the importance of maintaining an unbroken chain of custody and ensuring the integrity of digital evidence, which is directly supported by imaging the original media. An incorrect approach that involves directly analyzing the live system without proper precautions fails to uphold the principle of evidence integrity. This can lead to the alteration or destruction of volatile data, rendering it unusable for forensic analysis or inadmissible in court. Ethically, it violates the duty of care to preserve evidence accurately. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on file system copies without creating a forensic image, may miss deleted files or fragments of data that are critical for a comprehensive investigation. This approach is professionally deficient, as it does not guarantee a complete and accurate representation of the original state of the storage media. Furthermore, it may not satisfy the stringent requirements for digital evidence admissibility in many jurisdictions, as it does not provide the same level of assurance against alteration as a bitstream image. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the investigative goals, the nature of the evidence, and the potential risks to evidence integrity. This includes understanding the legal and ethical obligations related to digital evidence. Investigators should always prioritize methods that ensure the preservation of original evidence, such as creating forensic images, before conducting any analysis. They must be aware of and adhere to established forensic procedures and best practices, which are often reflected in certification standards like CHFI, to ensure that their actions are both technically sound and legally admissible. Question 11. Research into the impact of a suspected ransomware attack on a financial institution's critical servers. A computer hacking forensic investigator, CHFI, is tasked with responding. The immediate concern is to stop the spread of the ransomware and recover affected systems. Considering the strict regulatory framework governing digital evidence in the United States, which of the following approaches best balances the urgency of incident response with the imperative of preserving forensically sound evidence? Option A. Proceed with live analysis on the affected servers to identify the ransomware strain and its propagation methods, making notes of findings as the investigation progresses. Option B. Immediately shut down all affected servers and initiate a full system wipe to prevent further encryption, then restore from known good backups. Option C. Utilize automated forensic tools provided by the security vendor to quickly scan and remove the ransomware, relying on the tool's output for the investigation's findings. Option D. Create bit-for-bit forensic images of all affected servers and relevant storage media before any analysis or remediation actions are taken, ensuring all steps are meticulously documented and chain of custody is maintained. The correct answer is B. Immediately shut down all affected servers and initiate a full system wipe to prevent further encryption, then restore from known good backups. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for rapid incident response and the strict legal and ethical obligations of a computer hacking forensic investigator, CHFI. The urgency of containing a potential data breach must be balanced against the requirement to preserve evidence integrity and adhere to established forensic procedures, all within the defined regulatory framework. The investigator must make critical decisions that could impact the investigation's validity, the organization's legal standing, and the potential prosecution of offenders. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and forensically sound methodology. It prioritizes the preservation of the original evidence by creating a bit-for-bit forensic image before any analysis or remediation actions are taken. This aligns with the fundamental principles of digital forensics, which are often codified in legal guidelines and best practices that CHFI certifications are based upon. By documenting every step and maintaining a strict chain of custody, the investigator ensures that the evidence is admissible in legal proceedings and that the findings are defensible. This adherence to established protocols is crucial for maintaining professional credibility and meeting regulatory expectations for evidence handling. An incorrect approach that involves immediate system shutdown and wiping of affected drives before imaging is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action destroys volatile data, such as active processes, network connections, and in-memory information, which can be critical for understanding the scope and nature of the attack. It also compromises the integrity of the original evidence, making it impossible to perform a thorough and unbiased forensic analysis. Such actions would likely violate legal standards for evidence preservation, potentially leading to the exclusion of evidence in court and undermining the entire investigation. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with analysis on the live system without creating a forensic image, also represents a critical failure. Live analysis can alter the state of the system, overriding or destroying crucial evidence. This violates the principle of non-alteration of evidence, a cornerstone of digital forensics. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the scientific rigor required in forensic investigations. A third incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on vendor-provided automated tools without independent verification or proper documentation, is also professionally unacceptable. While automated tools can be efficient, they may not capture all relevant data or may interpret it in a way that is not legally or forensically sound. Without independent verification and meticulous documentation of the process and findings, the results are not defensible. This can lead to erroneous conclusions and a compromised investigation, failing to meet the standards expected of a CHFI. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the incident response plan, the legal and regulatory requirements of the jurisdiction, and the principles of digital forensics. The investigator must first assess the situation to determine the immediate risks and the type of evidence likely to be present. Then, they must prioritize actions that preserve evidence integrity, such as creating forensic images, before undertaking any analysis or remediation. Thorough documentation of all actions taken, including the rationale behind them, is paramount. Consulting with legal counsel or incident response managers when in doubt is also a critical part of responsible decision-making. Question 12. The performance metrics show a significant increase in the volume of encrypted files discovered during a recent corporate data breach investigation. Within these encrypted files, the forensic investigator has identified what appears to be personally identifiable information, PI, belonging to customers. The investigator is unsure of the specific legal framework governing the handling of such data in this context. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the forensic investigator? Option A. Immediately attempt to decrypt and analyze all identified PII to understand the full scope of the breach. Option B. Delete the encrypted files containing PII to prevent any potential unauthorized access or privacy violations. Option C. Proceed with the analysis of other non-PII related evidence, deferring any action on the encrypted PII files until the investigation is complete. Option D. Secure and isolate the encrypted files containing PII, document their existence and location, and consult with legal counsel and relevant data protection authorities regarding proper handling and potential decryption. The correct answer is A. Immediately attempt to decrypt and analyze all identified PII to understand the full scope of the breach. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the investigator encounters data that may be subject to privacy regulations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to conduct a thorough investigation with the legal and ethical obligations to protect sensitive personal information. Failure to do so can lead to severe legal repercussions, including fines and reputational damage, and compromise the integrity of the investigation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately recognizing the potential privacy implications of the discovered data and taking proactive steps to consult with legal counsel and relevant data protection authorities. This aligns with the principles of lawful data handling and privacy enshrined in regulations like the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which is a primary framework for digital forensics professionals operating within or impacting the EU. Consulting legal experts ensures that the investigation proceeds in a manner that is compliant with all applicable laws, minimizing the risk of unauthorized access or disclosure of personal data. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to the legal framework governing digital evidence. Incorrect approaches analysis, One incorrect approach is to proceed with the analysis of the sensitive data without seeking legal guidance. This directly violates privacy regulations such as the GDPR, which mandates strict controls on the processing of personal data. Such an action could be construed as unauthorized access or disclosure, leading to significant penalties. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the sensitive nature of the data and continue the investigation as if no privacy concerns exist. This demonstrates a lack of awareness of or disregard for legal and ethical obligations, which is professionally unacceptable. It fails to uphold the duty of care expected of a forensic investigator to handle evidence responsibly and in accordance with the law. A third incorrect approach is to delete or destroy the sensitive data without proper documentation or legal authorization. While seemingly a way to avoid privacy issues, this action constitutes spoliation of evidence, which is a serious offense. It obstructs justice and undermines the investigative process, carrying severe legal consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals in digital forensics must adopt a risk-based approach. When encountering potentially sensitive data, the immediate step should be to pause, identify the nature of the data, and assess its potential legal and privacy implications. This should be followed by consulting with legal counsel and, if necessary, relevant regulatory bodies. Documentation of all steps taken, including consultations and decisions made, is paramount. This systematic process ensures that investigations are conducted legally, ethically, and with the highest degree of professional integrity, safeguarding both the integrity of the evidence and the rights of individuals. Question 13. The audit findings indicate a significant data breach affecting customer personal information and proprietary company data. As a computer hacking forensic investigator, what is the most critical aspect to prioritize in your immediate response to ensure regulatory compliance and mitigate further harm to individuals and the organization? Option A. Securely preserve all digital evidence, meticulously document the chain of custody, and initiate a comprehensive forensic analysis to identify the attack vector and scope of the breach, while simultaneously assessing the potential impact on affected individuals and the organization's operations and reputation. Option B. Begin the process of restoring affected systems to normal operations as quickly as possible to minimize business disruption, potentially overriding or compromising critical forensic evidence. Option C. Immediately inform all affected customers and stakeholders about the breach and its potential consequences, even before a full forensic analysis is complete, to demonstrate transparency. Option D. Focus solely on identifying the technical vulnerabilities exploited by the attackers to prevent recurrence, without immediate concern for the broader impact or customer notification. The correct answer is A. Securely preserve all digital evidence, meticulously document the chain of custody, and initiate a comprehensive forensic analysis to identify the attack vector and scope of the breach, while simultaneously assessing the potential impact on affected individuals and the organization's operations and reputation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a forensic investigator to navigate the complex interplay between technical evidence, legal obligations, and the significant impact of cybercrime on both individuals and organizations. The investigator must not only identify the technical root cause, but also understand and articulate the broader consequences, which can include financial losses, reputational damage, regulatory penalties, and emotional distress for victims. The pressure to deliver findings quickly while maintaining accuracy and adhering to strict legal and ethical standards is immense. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a comprehensive forensic investigation that meticulously documents all evidence, identifies the attack vector, and quantifies the impact. This aligns with the core principles of digital forensics, which demand thoroughness, objectivity, and adherence to established procedures. By focusing on evidence preservation, chain of custody, and detailed reporting of both technical findings and their business/individual consequences, the investigator fulfills their professional duty. This approach directly supports regulatory compliance by providing the necessary documentation for legal proceedings, internal investigations, and potential reporting to regulatory bodies, ensuring that the organization can take appropriate remedial actions and demonstrate due diligence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach might involve focusing solely on the technical aspects of the breach, without adequately assessing or reporting the broader impact on individuals and the organization. This fails to meet the investigative mandate of understanding the full scope of the cybercrime's consequences, potentially leading to underestimation of the severity and inadequate remediation efforts. Ethically, it neglects the responsibility to inform stakeholders of the full extent of the damage. Another incorrect approach could be to prematurely disclose findings or speculate on the impact without sufficient evidence. This violates the principle of objectivity and can lead to misinformation, reputational damage to the organization, and legal repercussions. It also compromises the integrity of the investigation and the admissibility of evidence. A third incorrect approach might be to overlook or downplay the potential regulatory implications of the cybercrime. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the legal landscape and could result in the organization failing to meet its reporting obligations, leading to significant fines and sanctions. It also fails to protect the individuals whose data may have been compromised. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach that begins with understanding the scope of the investigation and the relevant legal and regulatory frameworks. This involves meticulous evidence collection and preservation, followed by detailed technical analysis. Crucially, the impact assessment must be integrated throughout the process, considering financial, operational, reputational, and personal consequences. Clear, objective, and evidence-based reporting is paramount, ensuring that all findings are supported by verifiable data. Professionals must maintain continuous awareness of evolving cyber threats and regulatory requirements, and always prioritize ethical conduct and legal compliance. Question 14. Which approach would be most appropriate for a computer hacking forensic investigator, CHFI, to ensure the admissibility of digital evidence in a U.S. court, given the potential for alteration of data on a compromised system? Option A. Directly analyze the live, compromised system to quickly identify and extract key files related to the suspected hacking activity. Option B. Collect only the files that appear to be directly involved in the hacking incident, based on the investigator's initial assessment of the system's state. Option C. Rely on informal notes taken during the initial examination of the compromised system to reconstruct the forensic process later. Option D. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the compromised system and conduct all subsequent analysis on this image, meticulously documenting each step of the acquisition and analysis process. Correct answer is D. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the compromised system and conduct all subsequent analysis on this image, meticulously documenting each step of the acquisition and analysis process. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the integrity of digital evidence is paramount, yet the practicalities of data acquisition and preservation can introduce complexity. The investigator must balance the need for thoroughness with the imperative to maintain the chain of custody and adhere to legal standards for admissibility. The pressure to deliver findings quickly can tempt shortcuts, but these can compromise the entire investigation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes meticulous documentation and adherence to established forensic procedures. This aligns directly with the rules of evidence, particularly concerning the authentication and integrity of digital artifacts. By creating a forensic image, the investigator preserves the original evidence in a read-only state, preventing accidental alteration. The subsequent analysis on the copy ensures that the original remains untouched, a critical requirement for admissibility in legal proceedings. This method upholds the principle of best evidence, ensuring that the court receives the most reliable representation of the digital information. The detailed logging of every step taken, from acquisition to analysis, establishes a clear and verifiable chain of custody, which is fundamental to proving that the evidence presented is the same evidence collected and has not been tampered with. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly analyzing the live system without creating a forensic image. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it risks altering the very evidence being investigated. Live system analysis can trigger system logs, modify timestamps, or even overwrite deleted data, thereby compromising the integrity of the evidence. This directly violates the principle of preserving evidence in its original state and makes it difficult, if not impossible, to prove that the evidence presented in court is the same as what was originally seized. Another incorrect approach is to only collect specific files deemed relevant by the investigator, without a comprehensive acquisition. This is problematic because it introduces investigator bias and may overlook crucial evidence. The rules of evidence require that the collection process be thorough and unbiased. By selectively collecting data, the investigator may inadvertently exclude exculpatory evidence or artifacts that could provide context to the alleged crime. This selective collection also makes it challenging to establish a complete chain of custody for all data that was present on the system at the time of seizure. A third incorrect approach is to rely on informal notes taken during the initial examination without formal documentation. This is a critical failure in establishing a proper chain of custody and ensuring the admissibility of evidence. Informal notes are easily lost, misinterpreted, or challenged in court as unreliable. The rules of evidence demand a formal, documented record of all actions taken, including dates, times, individuals involved, and the specific procedures followed. Without this, the integrity of the evidence can be questioned, and its admissibility jeopardized. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, procedure-driven approach. This involves understanding the specific legal and regulatory framework governing evidence in the relevant jurisdiction. Before commencing any forensic activity, investigators should plan their approach, considering the type of evidence, potential legal challenges, and the requirements for admissibility. The core principle is to preserve the integrity of the evidence at all stages. This means prioritizing methods that create read-only copies and meticulously documenting every action. When faced with time constraints, professionals must resist the temptation to cut corners and instead communicate any potential delays or challenges to stakeholders, explaining the necessity of adhering to proper procedures to ensure the validity of their findings. Question 15. The review process indicates that a forensic investigator has successfully acquired a copy of a suspect's hard drive and has performed keyword searches and file carving to recover deleted data. However, during the preparation for a court hearing, it is discovered that the investigator did not maintain a detailed log of the specific software versions used for the analysis, nor did they document the exact command line parameters employed for the data recovery tools. Furthermore, the chain of custody log has a minor, unexplained gap of approximately 2 hours during the initial imaging process. The prosecution is concerned about the admissibility of the recovered digital evidence. Which of the following actions, if taken by the investigator, would best address the potential challenges to admissibility? Option A. Immediately re-imaging the suspect's hard drive using the same tools and documenting all parameters and the chain of custody meticulously, then submitting a supplementary report detailing the new findings and explaining the previous omissions. Option B. Discarding the recovered data due to the identified procedural deficiencies and proceeding with the case based on other available evidence. Option C. Providing the court with a general statement confirming that industry-standard forensic tools were used and that the chain of custody was maintained, without further elaboration. Option D. Focusing the defense on the suspect's potential guilt and arguing that the recovered data, even if technically flawed in its collection, strongly implicates the suspect. The correct answer is A. Immediately re-imaging the suspect's hard drive using the same tools and documenting all parameters and the chain of custody meticulously, then submitting a supplementary report detailing the new findings and explaining the previous omissions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, ensuring the integrity and admissibility of digital evidence in a legal proceeding. The core difficulty lies in navigating the specific legal standards for evidence, which often require demonstrating that the evidence has not been tampered with and was collected using reliable methods. The investigator must balance the need for thoroughness with the strict requirements of the court, where any deviation can lead to the exclusion of crucial evidence. The pressure to present a compelling case while adhering to legal protocols makes this a high-stakes situation requiring meticulous attention to detail and a deep understanding of evidentiary rules. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting every step of the forensic process, from initial seizure to analysis and reporting. This includes maintaining a detailed chain of custody, using validated forensic tools, and ensuring that the evidence is handled in a manner that preserves its original state. The investigator must be prepared to testify about these procedures and demonstrate that they meet the Daubert standard, or equivalent in the specified jurisdiction, assuming U.S. federal rules of evidence for this CHFI context, for the admissibility of scientific evidence. This involves showing that the methods used are generally accepted in the scientific community, have been tested, are subject to peer review, have known error rates, and can be controlled. By adhering to these principles, the investigator builds a strong foundation for the evidence's admissibility, ensuring its value in court. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on the output of forensic software without independently verifying the results or documenting the specific configurations and versions of the tools used. This fails to meet the Daubert standards requirement for testability and known error rates, as the underlying methodology of the tool might not be transparent or validated to the court's satisfaction. Another incorrect approach is failing to maintain a complete and unbroken chain of custody. Any gap or break in this chain raises serious questions about the evidence's integrity, suggesting it may have been altered or compromised, thus violating fundamental legal principles of evidence handling. A third incorrect approach is presenting findings without clearly outlining the methodologies employed and the rationale behind analytical decisions. This lack of transparency prevents the court from assessing the reliability and validity of the forensic analysis, potentially leading to its exclusion. Professional reasoning. Professionals in digital forensics must adopt a proactive and rigorous approach to evidence handling. This involves understanding the specific evidentiary rules of the jurisdiction in which they are operating. The decision-making process should prioritize documentation, validation, and transparency at every stage. When faced with a situation where evidence might be challenged, the investigator should always err on the side of caution, ensuring that all procedures are defensible and can withstand legal scrutiny. This requires continuous professional development to stay abreast of evolving legal standards and forensic techniques. Question 16. The analysis reveals that a newly certified computer hacking forensic investigator, CHFI, is contemplating their next career move. They have a foundational understanding of forensic principles and tools, but are unsure how to best position themselves for long-term success and specialization in a competitive job market. Which of the following career development strategies represents the most effective and ethically sound approach for this investigator? Option A. Delay further specialized training and certification until a specific job requirement necessitates it, relying primarily on on-the-job learning in their first role. Option B. Focus on obtaining a broad spectrum of entry-level certifications across various digital forensic domains to maximize initial job prospects. Option C. Prioritize extensive theoretical study of advanced forensic concepts without actively seeking practical application or further certification, believing knowledge alone is sufficient for career advancement. Option D. Proactively pursue advanced, specialized certifications in high-demand areas such as mobile device forensics or cloud forensics, while seeking opportunities to apply these skills in practical projects or internships. Correct answer is B. Focus on obtaining a broad spectrum of entry-level certifications across various digital forensic domains to maximize initial job prospects. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for aspiring computer hacking forensic investigators, CHFI, when considering career progression. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate need for practical experience with the long-term strategic development of specialized skills and certifications that are highly valued in the field. A CHFI professional must make informed decisions about their career path that align with industry standards, ethical obligations, and the evolving landscape of digital forensics. The correct approach emphasizes a structured and proactive strategy for career development. It recognizes that while entry-level roles provide foundational experience, actively pursuing advanced certifications and specializing in niche areas like mobile forensics or cloud forensics is crucial for long-term career growth and marketability. This aligns with the ethical imperative for forensic investigators to maintain a high level of competence and to stay abreast of technological advancements, as mandated by professional bodies and implied in the rigorous standards expected of CHFI professionals. Such a strategy ensures that the investigator can handle increasingly complex cases and contribute meaningfully to investigations, upholding the integrity of the forensic process. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on accumulating a broad range of basic certifications without a clear specialization risks creating a superficial understanding and a lack of depth in critical areas. This can lead to an inability to effectively address complex forensic challenges, potentially compromising the accuracy and reliability of findings. Ethically, this could be seen as a failure to maintain the necessary expertise to perform the duties of a forensic investigator competently. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying advanced training until a specific job requirement arises, is reactive rather than proactive. This can result in missed opportunities for career advancement and a competitive disadvantage. It also fails to meet the implicit ethical obligation to continuously improve one's skills in a rapidly changing technological environment. A third incorrect approach, prioritizing theoretical knowledge over practical application, without seeking opportunities to apply that knowledge in real-world scenarios, can lead to a disconnect between understanding and execution. This can hinder the development of practical problem-solving skills essential for forensic investigations, and may not satisfy the practical experience requirement often sought by employers and professional bodies. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that involves continuous self-assessment of skills, research into industry trends and in-demand specializations, and strategic planning for certification acquisition and practical application. This proactive approach ensures that career development is aligned with both personal aspirations and the evolving needs of the digital forensics field, upholding the highest standards of professional conduct and competence. Question 17. Governance review demonstrates that an employee is suspected of unauthorized access to sensitive company financial data, potentially violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, CHFI. The forensic investigator needs to examine the employee's email and network activity logs to confirm the extent of the unauthorized access. Which of the following approaches best aligns with federal laws and best practices for conducting this investigation? Option A. Conduct a forensic examination of the employee's email and network activity logs based solely on a general company policy that states all employee data on company systems is company property and can be accessed for any business-related reason. Option B. Obtain a court order or subpoena for the employee's email and network activity logs, and if company policy explicitly permits access to employee communications for investigative purposes, proceed with a forensic examination of the requested data. Option C. Access the employee's email and network activity logs only after confirming that the employee has explicitly consented in writing to the monitoring of all their digital communications for any investigative purpose. Option D. Immediately access all of the employee's email and network activity logs, assuming that as an employee, their digital communications on company systems are subject to company oversight for investigative purposes. The correct answer is B. Obtain a court order or subpoena for the employee's email and network activity logs, and if company policy explicitly permits access to employee communications for investigative purposes, proceed with the forensic examination of the requested data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, balancing the need for thorough investigation with the legal boundaries of data access and privacy. The core difficulty lies in determining the scope of permissible access to electronic communications when investigating potential unauthorized access to a company's computer systems. Misinterpreting the scope of relevant federal laws, such as the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, CHFI, and the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, ECPA, can lead to significant legal repercussions, including civil liability and criminal charges, and compromise the integrity of the investigation. The investigator must navigate the nuances of what constitutes unauthorized access under the CHFI and the protections afforded to electronic communications under ECPA. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a meticulous review of the company's internal policies regarding computer system usage and data access, coupled with a precise understanding of the CHFI provisions concerning unauthorized access. If the investigation reveals that the employee's actions, such as accessing systems or data beyond their authorized scope or for impermissible purposes, constitute a violation of company policy and fall within the definition of exceeding authorized access under the CHFI, then the forensic investigator can proceed with examining the relevant data. This approach prioritizes adherence to both internal governance and federal law, ensuring that the investigation is legally sound and ethically defensible. The investigator must also consider the ECPA provisions regarding the interception and access of stored electronic communications, ensuring that any data acquisition is conducted in a manner that respects these protections, typically through consent, court order, or specific statutory exceptions. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately accessing all of the employee's electronic communications without first establishing a clear legal basis or policy violation. This directly contravenes the CHFI, which generally prohibits the intentional interception or unauthorized access of electronic communications. Such an action could be construed as illegal surveillance and lead to severe penalties. Another incorrect approach is to assume that any access to company systems by an employee is permissible for investigative purposes without a proper legal framework or policy justification. This overlooks the CHFI prohibition against exceeding authorized access, which can occur even if the employee has general access to the system. The CHFI specifically addresses unauthorized access to protected computers, and a forensic investigator must demonstrate that the employee's actions cross this legal threshold. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on a broad company policy that grants unrestricted access to employee data without considering the specific limitations and protections outlined in federal laws like CHFI. While company policies are important, they cannot override federal statutory protections. Professional reasoning. Forensic investigators must adopt a risk-based, legally compliant decision-making process. This begins with a thorough understanding of the alleged incident and the relevant legal frameworks, CHFI, CHFI, and any applicable state laws. The investigator should consult with legal counsel to interpret these laws and their application to the specific facts. Next, they must review internal company policies to determine if the employee's actions violated established rules. Only after establishing a clear legal and policy basis for accessing specific electronic communications should the investigator proceed with data acquisition. Documentation is paramount at every step, detailing the justification for each action taken. This systematic approach ensures that the investigation is both effective and legally defensible, protecting both the company and the investigator from potential liabilities. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that a critical server has been compromised, and the forensic investigator is tasked with recovering deleted files from its NTFS file system. The investigator has identified several unallocated clusters that appear to contain remnants of the deleted files. The primary objective is to extract these remnants for analysis without altering the live file system. Which of the following actions best adheres to forensic best practices and the regulatory framework for digital evidence preservation in this context? Option A. Inform the system administrator to shut down the server immediately and then attempt to recover files from the powered-off state using specialized hardware. Option B. Directly access the unallocated clusters on the live server's drive using a hex editor to manually extract the file fragments. Option C. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the entire drive, then mount the image in read-only mode and use forensic tools to carve for deleted file data from the unallocated space. Option D. Use a file recovery utility that attempts to reconstruct the file system structure on the live drive to make deleted files visible for easier extraction. The correct answer is C. Create a bit-for-bit forensic image of the entire drive, then mount the image in read-only mode and use forensic tools to carve for deleted file data from the unallocated space. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the forensic investigator must navigate the complexities of a fragmented file system on a compromised device, while adhering strictly to the legal and procedural requirements of digital forensics within the specified jurisdiction. The integrity of the evidence is paramount, and any deviation from established protocols could render the findings inadmissible in court. The investigator must balance the need for thoroughness with the imperative to avoid altering the digital evidence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation of evidence integrity through non-intrusive methods and meticulous documentation, aligning with the foundational principles of digital forensics and the regulatory framework governing evidence handling. This approach ensures that the collected data is forensically sound and legally admissible. An incorrect approach that involves directly modifying or attempting to fix the file system to make it more accessible without proper imaging and validation would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action directly violates the principle of maintaining the original state of the evidence, potentially introducing alterations that could be misconstrued or used to discredit the investigation. Furthermore, it bypasses the required chain of custody and documentation protocols, undermining the legal admissibility of any subsequent findings. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on automated tools without manual verification and understanding of the underlying file system structures, risks overlooking crucial evidence or misinterpreting data, leading to incomplete or inaccurate forensic reports, which is a failure in due diligence and professional competence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the legal and jurisdictional requirements for evidence collection. This is followed by a thorough assessment of the evidence source and its condition, leading to the selection of appropriate, forensically sound tools and methodologies. Meticulous documentation at every step, from initial seizure to final reporting, is crucial. The investigator must constantly evaluate the potential impact of their actions on the integrity of the evidence and be prepared to justify their methodology based on established forensic principles and legal precedent. Question 19. During the evaluation of a potential data breach incident, a computer forensics investigator must determine the appropriate boundaries for their examination, considering the need to adhere strictly to U.S. federal and relevant state laws governing digital evidence. Which approach best defines the scope of computer forensics in this context? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive forensic imaging and analysis of all digital devices and network traffic within the organization, regardless of their direct connection to the suspected breach, to ensure no potential evidence is missed. Option B. Expanding the scope to include the personal devices of employees suspected of involvement, without explicit legal authorization, on the assumption that company data might be stored on them. Option C. Focusing solely on the publicly accessible servers and websites of the organization, as these are the most likely targets for external breaches and are generally considered within the public domain. Option D. Defining the scope based on a preliminary risk assessment that identifies the specific systems, data types, and timeframes most likely affected by the breach, and obtaining necessary legal authorization for access to those specific areas. The correct answer is A. Conducting a comprehensive forensic imaging and analysis of all digital devices and network traffic within the organization, regardless of their direct connection to the suspected breach, to ensure no potential evidence is missed. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the scope of computer forensics can be broad, and without a clear understanding of its definition and boundaries, an investigator might overstep legal or ethical lines, or, conversely, fail to collect crucial evidence. The risk assessment approach is critical here to ensure that the forensic investigation remains focused, proportionate, and compliant with relevant legal frameworks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and risk-based methodology by first defining the scope of computer forensics within the context of the investigation and the applicable regulatory framework. In this case, U.S. federal law and relevant state statutes governing digital evidence. The investigator ensures that all actions are legally permissible and ethically sound. This proactive risk assessment helps identify potential legal pitfalls, privacy concerns, and the types of digital evidence that are relevant to the case, thereby guiding the collection and analysis process efficiently and effectively. This aligns with the principles of due process and the lawful acquisition of evidence. An incorrect approach that fails to adequately define the scope of computer forensics risks violating privacy rights, exceeding the authority granted by search warrants or legal orders, and potentially rendering collected evidence inadmissible in court. For instance, collecting data beyond the scope of a warrant, even if it seems potentially relevant, is a clear regulatory and ethical failure. Another failure would be to assume a broad, unfettered scope for data collection without considering the specific legal limitations and the principle of proportionality, which could lead to the acquisition of sensitive personal information unrelated to the investigation, violating data protection laws and ethical guidelines. A third failure would be to narrowly define the scope to the point where critical evidence is overlooked, hindering the investigation and potentially allowing a perpetrator to evade justice, which, while not a direct legal violation, represents a failure in professional duty. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the legal and regulatory landscape governing the investigation. This involves consulting relevant statutes, case law, and departmental policies. Next, they should clearly define the objectives of the investigation and the specific types of digital evidence likely to achieve those objectives. A risk assessment should then be conducted to identify potential legal ethical, and practical challenges associated with data collection and analysis. This framework emphasizes a methodical, legally compliant, and ethically responsible approach to computer forensics, ensuring that the investigation is both effective and defensible. Question 20. Governance review demonstrates that a critical investigation requires the analysis of a suspect hard drive. The forensic investigator has been tasked with examining the drive for evidence of unauthorized access and data exfiltration. Given the paramount importance of maintaining the integrity of the original evidence for potential legal proceedings, which of the following actions best represents the initial and most critical step in the forensic process? Option A. Immediately begin searching for deleted files and unallocated space on the suspect hard drive using a data recovery tool. Option B. Perform a live analysis of the suspect hard drive using specialized forensic software to identify recently accessed files and network connections. Option C. Create a forensically sound bit-for-bit image of the suspect hard drive and conduct all subsequent analysis on this image. Option D. Directly examine the suspect hard drive using standard operating system utilities to locate and extract relevant files. The correct answer is B. Perform a live analysis of the suspect hard drive using specialized forensic software to identify recently accessed files and network connections. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics: the need to preserve the integrity of evidence while conducting a thorough analysis. Professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of an investigation with the strict legal and ethical requirements for handling digital evidence. A forensic investigator must be acutely aware of the potential for evidence alteration, both intentional and unintentional, and employ methodologies that mitigate these risks. Careful judgment is required to select the appropriate tools and techniques that adhere to established forensic principles and relevant legal frameworks. The correct approach involves creating a forensically sound image of the suspect storage media. This is best professional practice because it ensures that the original evidence remains unaltered. By working on a bit-for-bit copy, the investigator can perform all subsequent analysis without risking the integrity of the original data. This aligns with the fundamental principle of digital forensics: do no harm to the evidence. This practice is implicitly supported by various legal standards and guidelines that emphasize the need for verifiable and untainted evidence in legal proceedings. For example, in the U.S., the Daubert Standard and Frye Standard, while focused on admissibility of scientific evidence, underscore the importance of reliable methodologies, which includes preserving evidence integrity. The chain of custody, a critical component of evidence handling, is also directly supported by this approach, as it allows for a clear record of how the evidence was handled and preserved. An incorrect approach would be to directly analyze the suspect's storage media without creating a forensically sound image. This is professionally unacceptable because it directly violates the principle of evidence preservation. Any modification, however minor, to the original media during analysis can render the evidence inadmissible in court. This could lead to the dismissal of charges or a compromised investigation. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of diligence and respect for the legal process. Another incorrect approach would be to use standard operating system tools for data recovery or analysis without proper forensic validation. These tools are not designed with forensic integrity in mind and can inadvertently alter file system metadata, timestamps, or even overwrite deleted data, thereby compromising the evidence. This failure to use specialized forensic tools and methodologies constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse, as it deviates from accepted forensic practices and could lead to the introduction of unreliable or inadmissible evidence. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the output of a single forensic tool without independent verification or cross-referencing with other methods. While tools are essential, over-reliance on one can mask potential tool-specific limitations or biases, leading to incomplete or inaccurate findings. This lack of due diligence in verification can be seen as a failure to meet the standards of rigorous forensic investigation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, understanding the legal and regulatory framework governing the investigation. Second, identifying the specific objectives of the analysis. Third, selecting the most appropriate forensic tools and techniques that are known to preserve evidence integrity. Fourth, meticulously documenting every step of the process, including the creation of forensically sound images and the tools used. And finally, ensuring that all findings are verifiable and can withstand scrutiny in a legal context. This methodical approach, grounded in established forensic principles and legal requirements, is crucial for conducting effective and legally defensible digital investigations.